Hey everybody, I pray this video finds you blessed. So Rich sent me over some Indian olive wood. It has some burl on it as well. So right now I'm just making a mold to not use as much resin. I had bigger buckets, but I didn't want to pour so much resin for this piece, and it was kind of awkward shaped. I did take it over to my bandsaw and take off some pieces that were sticking out. The bottom clear piece that I'm using is an 8-inch. It's a plant cover thingy, or a plant pan. So if you have indoor plants, it helps keep the water from leaking all over the place. It's a little thin. I decided to go ahead and reinforce that with some plastic frisbee that I also bought during Easter time on clearance at Walmart. And then for the top portion, the Total Boat buckets fit perfectly for it, and I just hot glued that on there and then taped it all off to double reinforce. That plant plastic was a little too thin and the resin got hot, so it did leak out a little bit, but thank goodness the resin cured before it completely leaked out. I'm using Total Boat 2-to-1, the slow hardener. The slow hardener is what you want to use if you have a pressure pot. The thick set is what you want to use if you're not using a pressure pot. Choosing colors sometimes is, you feel like you just run out of ideas. So I called up Doug at Pole Barn and he said gold and bronze, so that's what I used. He picked my colors for me this week, so thank you, Doug. My dad made these really cool knob handles for the pressure pot with his 3D printer, and they really do help to where you can crank down on those knobs, because they're for the pressure pot for Harbor Freight. They're just really knobby. Anyways, thank you, Dad, for those. The resin was still really warm when I poured the second pour, and it immediately started to bubble. So I just quickly, as fast as I could, poured it all in there, put it in the pressure pot. Hopefully the pressure would help keep the boiling to a minimum and keep the air bubbles to a minimum. It didn't keep it from having heat cracks. A lot of times if you have these cracks, it's caused from the resin getting too hot, and you'll get these cracks. So I just took some silver, or I tried to make like a sterling silver color to put over top of it, being that I was using metal colors to fill those cracks. The first pour did crack, but the second pour filled those cracks. And then this is the third pour, which it did fill, for the most part, all the cracks that I had in there. Throughout the piece, you can see that there are cracks, but they are filled from the first and second, or yeah, the second and third pour. Because I knew there was cracks in the resin when I cast it, I'm just stopping every so often, well, quite a bit actually, more often than I normally would, and just checking to make sure that the cracks aren't open, and the ones that are open, I just kept filling with thin CA glue just to make sure that this piece, and I always stood off to the side, making sure that I wasn't in a line of fire in case this thing did decide to come apart and explode. So be careful if you are turning a resin piece that you know that has cracked, even though you may have filled it. You just never know what's going on inside there. You will notice throughout this turn that I use a multitude of different gouges and tools. There really is no rhyme or reason for that. I sharpen all of my tools before I start a project, so in case I need something, it's ready to go. I don't have to stop and sharpen it. But as soon as I started getting into the wood portion of this piece, I quickly realized that none of the edges on any of my tools were holding. It was just, they were going dull very fast. So I just took every gouge and every scraper I had and would rotate through them. So as soon as that edge would go dull on the gouge, I'd pick up another gouge that was sharpened. I was trying to stick with either my 3/4 Sorby bowl gouge or my fingernail grind because that seemed to be doing the best, but I was having to stop and sharpen them so often that I just said, heck with it. I'm going to use every tool I have. And because it was taking forever. I mean, forever to get through. And that was just the little bit of wood that was showing through the resin at this point. Again, every time I stop, I'm frequently filling the cracks, even if they don't look like they're quite open. I was feeling them, and you can tell, when they're open, when they're not, and just making sure this piece stays together long enough for me to get it turned. broke out my Carbide tool because I figured if anything was going to get through this, it would be the Carbide. But what it was doing was it was digging in really well to the resin, and as soon as it would hit the wood, it would bounce and then dig back into the resin. So I had to kind of abandon the Carbide. It was too rough, and I don't have a negative rake on that Carbide tip, so it was just not it was not doing well. It was causing the resin to chip out once it hit the resin, and it would bounce off the wood. So I debated doing a tenon on this piece just because of the cracks, and normally I would do that if I had a piece of wood or something else that had some cracks, because you put a mortise in and it kind of just further separates them. So I was really concerned about doing the mortise and if there were cracks that were like on the inside or if I opened some more up. But I noticed that when I started turning the mortise, it was mostly wood and not resin. So I was like, okay, well, I can go ahead and do a mortise and it won't be so bad. There's wood there to help kind of make up for the fact that there could be some cracked resin. And there was some cracked resin in the bottom, but like I said, the fact that the bottom of it was mostly wood, it really helped to where I could do a mortise instead of a tenon. And that little bit of piece of wood that I turned on the bottom was very deceiving, needless to say. I was thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot wait to get, into this piece and hollow it out. It shouldn't take very long because, when I turned the bottom, that wood was it was hard. I could tell that it was hard, but it wasn't, concrete hard. So I felt, okay, well, the inside of this should go a lot smoother and I shouldn't have any issues. Well, yeah. I apologize for all of that. You couldn't see what was going on up until this point. I took my Forstner Bit and hollowed it out about halfway. Because of the cracks, I wanted to keep some meat down in the very bottom of it and most of the wood so that way it would hold it together in case those cracks were a little unstable. I'm using the Yoder's hollowing system for this, for hollowing it out, and the very beginning didn't seem so bad. I started getting into, like, I would call it the heart of the meat, and I kind of fast forward through a lot of that, but I had to take my tip off probably after 2 passes. It started getting to the point that 2 or 3 passes and then sharpen, 2 or 3 passes and then sharpen. I was having a hard time keeping my tool sharp, and it was beyond frustrating. It took me about 5.5 hours just to get this part here where I'm hollowing out just half of it. Of course, I cut out quite a bit because 5.5 hours of doing the same thing over and over and over again, even if I speed it up as fast as I could, it's just plain out boring. So the next day I came out and drilled the rest of the way to the bottom where I wanted to go. It wasn't very much. And again, this took about another 5 hours just to hollow out the bottom. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but when you're stopping so often to sharpen tools, that took up a lot of the time, was just stopping sharpening. I also tried doing some other things like using my Carbide in there, and again, that did the same thing on the inside as it did the outside. It would grip the wood and just shatter the resin. So I was like, that's not going to work. I tried reaching my scraper in there, my negative rake scraper, and it wasn't doing anything. It was just bouncing right off. There was parts where it was just mostly solid wood, and you can see as I go, there's less and less chips coming off. And that Yoder tip is a cobalt steel tip, and I normally don't have issues with it going dull fast. I don't have to sharpen it too often, but like I said, I was not getting very far. So I decided to kind of throw in the towel, and I felt, well, I did my best, and I can't I can't afford to replace every tip of every tool in my shop after this one. And 10 and a half hours of hollowing was quite enough. I had quite enough of that. So to be honest, I threw in the towel, like I said, and just decided, well, it's not going to be hollowed out like I would love to hollow it out, but this thing gave me a fight. So I felt I'll just, finish it while I'm ahead, and, before I throw some dynamite in there. And I sanded this to about 320, and then I used the Total Boat 2-to-1. Just paint it on there really good, and then keep my lathe running for about 30-40 minutes at 50 RPMs. I put a box over it, but unfortunately that did not prevent every gnat and bug in Florida to attack my piece. Of course, anytime I finish something at night, that happens. So I'm showing you here the wonderful gnat finish I have. I just was so frustrated, but I kind of expected that to happen. But it's okay. I just sanded it all back really good. I used 320 again, and then just recoated it. And this time it was in the morning, so I didn't have these bugs stalking me. I repeated the process with the second coat, the same as I did the first. The bottom part, normally whenever I do resin pieces, I'll just stick one of my stickers. These stickers I buy from Vistaprint, and then just use the fast hardener to seal that in. And that is that. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I pray you have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and God bless.